Hey, everyone. I think a lot of us out there are interested in this whole covert contract
Hmm.
thing,
Hmm.
in relationships.
Yeah.
How does society sort of like set the stage for that?
Right.
And we're going to really take a deep dive today on this topic.
Okay.
And the book we're going to look at is The Patriarch's Rebirth
Okay.
by Conrad Riker.
Interesting.
And this book really takes a look at the role of men in society
Hmm.
and how things have changed, especially with like the rise of feminism and stuff.
Right. Yeah. It's fascinating because it really goes back to like the biological basis of it all.
Yeah.
Like he argues that men and women are just inherently different
Yeah.
biologically, and that's really shaped how we've structured everything,
Yeah.
throughout history.
Yeah. And one of the first things that jumped out at me reading this book
Mm.
was, this idea that men they're just stronger physically, right?
Right.
We have greater muscle mass, we have
Mhm.
denser bones. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but he's saying it's not just about like, looks or whatever.
Yeah.
It goes deeper.
It's tied to our evolution. Like,
Yeah.
why are we built this way? And he brings in this concept, from evolutionary biology called parental investment theory.
Parental investment theory.
Yeah, and basically it suggests that men and women, because of these biological differences, have evolved different strategies
Right.
for survival and reproduction.
Got it.
So women, they can only have a limited number of children.
Yeah.
So they're more invested in nurturing and raising each one.
Makes sense.
But men, on the other hand, can potentially father many children.
Right.
So their focus historically has been more on providing resources and protection.
So I guess like the classic hunter-gatherer type of thing.
Exactly.
Okay, but I guess how does this tie back to patriarchy and the whole how society is structured?
Well, you see, he's saying that because of those differences, men naturally took on these leadership roles throughout history. The physical strength, the risk-taking,
Yeah.
those are often associated with men, right? Those were key in developing these hierarchical societies.
Like he uses those examples, like the ancient Greeks
Yes.
and Victorian Britain, those societies that really flourished under, patriarchal systems.
Exactly. And they had these clear hierarchies, like
Yeah.
in the government, the military business.
Totally.
And he argues that that was actually beneficial.
So he's saying it wasn't a bad thing?
Right. Like take the military, for example.
Okay.
You need that clear chain of command
Yeah.
to make quick decisions,
Like in the art of war.
Exactly like Sun Tzu talks about.
Yeah.
You got to coordinate these large groups of people, and someone's got to be in charge.
Yeah, you can kind of say the same for governments and businesses too, right?
It's efficient.
You need that clear leader, especially for like resource allocation
Right.
or like making those big strategic decisions.
Reminds me of the lean startup.
Oh, yeah.
Eric Ries.
He talks about like decisiveness and clear leadership, like crucial for innovation.
Couldn't agree more. But, it's important to think about this too.
What's that?
Those hierarchical structures,
Yeah.
even though they might have worked really well in the past, how do they affect us today?
That's the quote.
In our relationships at work, just like in society.
Yeah.
Like how do these power structures, these remnants of patriarchy, how are they impacting us?
It makes you think. It makes you think.
It does.
Now, I got to say, one of the things that Riker really kind of pushes back on is this whole concept of gender equality,
Oh, yeah.
especially like equal pay for equal work.
Okay.
And this is where I think things get interesting.
Okay. Yeah.
Because, he's not afraid to kind of like, stir the pot a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying focusing only on equal pay kind of misses this bigger point
Uh-huh.
about those inherent differences
Yeah.
between men and women that we were talking about before.
Right.
And he uses this phrase marriage plantation
Oh, wow.
to describe how he thinks the institution of marriage as it exists today is actually financially disadvantageous.
To men.
To men, yeah.
Interesting.
He talks about the high cost of weddings,
Right.
alimony payments, child support.
Yeah.
I remember that he brought up this statistic, that men often experience a 10% decrease
Wow.
in their standard of living
After divorce.
after divorce,
Yeah.
while women see a 3% increase.
Huh. So it was like a flip.
It's a flip, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's using those statistics to kind of highlight what he sees as, an imbalance
I see.
in the system, but he's not saying men should avoid marriage
Right.
altogether,
Of course not.
but he is urging them to to really understand
Aware.
the potential financial risks
Yeah.
and to protect themselves.
Go in with your eyes open.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It definitely makes you think about the economic realities
Yeah.
of marriage and divorce, and it all connects back to this idea of, he calls it a gynocentric society.
Yeah. Sorry, Leah.
Basically a society that's female-dominated,
Okay.
which he argues can negatively impact men.
So he's saying there's been a shift.
A power shift. Yeah.
Okay.
And he thinks that shift, combined with all these pressures of like modern society,
Yeah.
can lead to some real psychological challenges for men.
Like what kind of challenges?
He talks about this toxic masculinity double bind.
Oh, right.
It's like, men are criticized for being too masculine, but then they're also criticized for not being masculine enough.
So they're damned if they do, damned if they don't.
It's a tough spot.
Yeah.
It is. And he argues that this can lead to a lot of frustration and anger, even depression.
Right. They're told to suppress their natural instincts, their emotions.
Exactly.
It's got to be tough.
Yeah. And he really thinks that men are facing these unique pressures
Yeah.
in a society that kind of like demonizes these traditional masculine traits.
So where do we go from here?
Right. Like, what's the solution?
Does he offer anything?
He does. And we'll get into that when we come back for part 2.
Diving back into this, one of the things that really stuck with me is how Riker connects these ideas to religion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he argues that a lot of traditional religions, especially like Christianity and Islam, have historically supported these patriarchal structures.
He goes all the way back to the original texts.
He does. Like, I remember him pulling quotes from the Bible.
Yeah.
Where it emphasizes male leadership in the family.
Yeah, female submission.
Right. And he's saying it wasn't just like a cultural norm back then. It was seen as like divine instruction.
For how society should be organized.
Exactly.
Wow.
But then he contrasts that with these more modern interpretations, that try to like promote gender equality.
Within a religious context.
Yeah, but he's pretty critical of that.
Really?
Yeah, he says they're trying to force modern values onto these ancient texts.
Yeah.
And by doing that, they're distorting the original intent.
And undermining that whole concept of religious patriarchy.
Exactly.
So he's saying these attempts to modernize these teachings are actually creating more problems.
I think that's what he's getting at.
Interesting.
It's like, how much can we really reinterpret these texts without losing their original meaning?
Right. And how do those interpretations then impact the roles of men and women within those faiths?
It's a big question.
It is. It's a lot to think about, for sure. Now, shifting gears a bit.
Okay.
Riker also talks a lot about education and how the education system as it exists today might actually be failing boys.
In what way?
Well, he brings up several factors.
Okay.
Like the decline of male teachers, especially in those early years.
Yeah.
Like kindergarten, first grade.
I've noticed that.
And he's arguing that the teaching methods themselves have become kind of feminized.
Interesting.
Catering more to how girls learn.
Yeah.
And he thinks that there's this lack of positive male role models.
Oh, in the curriculum.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And that can leave boys feeling kind of alienated.
Right, without direction.
Yeah, he brings up this whole boys' crisis.
The boys' crisis?
Yeah, this idea that boys are falling behind girls academically.
Oh, I've heard of that.
And he's linking it to this feminization of education.
Interesting.
And suggests that these traditional masculine learning styles, like, more hands-on or competitive,
yeah,
that those are being suppressed.
So it's not that boys aren't capable.
Right.
It's that the system isn't really set up for them.
Exactly. And he even uses the term cultural Marxism to describe what he sees happening.
Cultural Marxism.
Yeah, I know that's a loaded term.
Yeah.
It is. So it's important to understand what he means by it.
Okay.
He's suggesting that there's this ideological agenda.
In education.
Yeah.
Okay.
That kind of pits men and women against each other.
So it's like a battle of the sexes almost.
Yeah, and he argues that boys are often taught to view themselves as the oppressors.
Oh, wow.
And girls as the victims.
Yeah.
Which can lead to, feelings of guilt and shame.
Yeah, I can see how that would be harmful.
Yeah, and he ties that back to the larger societal trends we've been discussing.
There's a shift toward a more gynocentric model.
Right, where traditional masculine values are being kind of demonized.
But there's a connection between what's happening in schools and what's happening in the broader culture.
Exactly. But like always, Riker doesn't just, point fingers.
Does he offer any solutions?
He does. He does. He talks about the need for more male-centered education,
Okay,
a return to more traditional teaching methods,
got it.
and a curriculum that celebrates the achievements of men throughout history.
It's like a more balanced approach.
Yeah, one that recognizes and values those unique needs and learning styles of boys.
While still promoting equality and respect.
Exactly. He really emphasizes this importance of male mentorship,
Oh, yeah.
saying that boys need these positive male role models.
To guide them.
Yeah, to guide them, to help them navigate, growing up in a society that often sends these conflicting messages.
About what it means to be a man.
Exactly. It's about giving boys that sense of belonging and purpose.
Which he feels is missing in education today.
He does. He does. Now, we've talked about biology, we talked about religion, education, but what about the political sphere?
Yeah, good point.
How does Riker see these ideas playing out in government and policy making?
I'm curious to hear his take on that.
Well, he's pretty critical of how feminist ideologies have influenced policy in recent decades.
Oh, okay.
He thinks that many policies, while intended to promote equality, have actually had these unintended negative consequences for men.
Like what? Can you give an example?
He brings up affirmative action policies.
Right.
He argues that while they aim to increase female representation,
Yeah.
they often prioritize gender over merit and qualifications.
Interesting.
And then there's the whole #MeToo movement,
Oh, right.
which, he acknowledges the importance of addressing sexual harassment and assault, of course.
Of course.
But he suggests that the movement has created this environment where men are often presumed guilty before proven innocent.
Like the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction.
Yeah. And that now men are being unfairly targeted and demonized.
It's a sensitive topic for sure.
It is. He's not afraid to tackle these controversial topics.
Yeah, it seems like he's going right for the heart of it.
He does. He even goes after the idea of the wage gap.
Oh, wow. Which has been a central talking point in the fight for equality.
It has been. He argues that the wage gap, as it's often presented, is largely a myth.
So he's saying it doesn't really exist.
Well, he dives into the statistics,
Okay.
suggests that the wage gap is primarily a result of factors like, career choices, education levels, hours worked.
Not necessarily outright discrimination then.
Right. More like differences in choices and life paths.
So is he saying that women don't face any challenges in the workplace?
Not exactly. He acknowledges that women do face their own unique obstacles,
Okay.
especially when it comes to things like balancing work and family life.
Right, right.
But his point is that the narrative of female victimhood has kind of overshadowed the struggles that men face.
So he's pushing for a more balanced perspective.
He is one that recognizes the challenges faced by both genders.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's a lot to unpack, that's for sure. This book it's dense. It covers so much ground.
It does.
As we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
what are some of the key takeaways you think will resonate with our listeners?
Well, I think one of the most important is this understanding of the biological and evolutionary roots of gender differences.
Yeah.
Like Riker's arguing these differences aren't just social constructs.
Right.
They're deeply ingrained in our biology and have shaped how our societies have developed.
And another key point is that he's advocating for a more balanced approach to gender equality.
Right, he's not against equality,
Right.
but he believes the pendulum has swung too far in favor of women.
And that men's rights and needs are being ignored.
Precisely, he's calling for a reevaluation of our societal structures and policies.
To make sure they're fair.
Yeah, for both men and women, taking into account our biological differences rather than trying to erase them.
Riker also talks a lot about the importance of men embracing their masculinity.
Yeah, that was a big theme.
He argues that these traditional masculine traits, strength, courage, leadership,
Those aren't toxic.
no. He says they're essential for a well-functioning society
He wants men to reject those negative stereotypes.
and embrace their unique strengths.
It's about stepping into your power.
It is. He even goes as far as to suggest that men need to create their own spaces
Your own community.
where they can connect with other men who share their values.
And support each other
Yeah.
in navigating these challenges of modern masculinity.
It sounds like he's calling for a patriarch's rebirth.
As the title suggests,
Right.
he's urging men to reclaim their rightful place in society.
And to push back against the forces that are trying to emasculate them.
It's a powerful message.
Yeah, it does feel like a reawakening, reclaiming that essential masculine energy. But he's not talking about going back to some outdated macho man, is he?
No, not at all. It's a healthy, balanced masculinity he's talking about. Embracing Strength and assertiveness, but also vulnerability and empathy.
Being a leader and a provider,
Yeah,
but also being in touch with your emotions and building those meaningful relationships.
exactly. And finding your own unique path to success, not necessarily defined by those conventional markers of achievement.
The ones that don't always feel in sync with masculine energy.
Right.
So it's about finding what fulfills you, what aligns with your values and strengths, and just going for it regardless of what society might say.
And it ties back to his critique of woke culture and intersectionality. Those ideologies, while well-intentioned, can sometimes create a victim mentality that holds men back.
He's not saying that inequality and oppression don't exist,
Right.
but he is saying be critical of those narratives that paint men as the enemy just for being men.
It's about understanding the complexities of gender dynamics without getting bogged down in those overly simplistic labels.
Individual responsibility, owning your choices, and creating the life you want.
Exactly. If you're a man listening to this and you're feeling lost or confused about your place in the world,
Yeah.
Riker's advice would be pretty clear. Embrace your masculinity.
Don't be ashamed of it.
Don't try to suppress it. Find healthy ways to express it.
Go out there and connect with other men on a similar journey.
Build those strong, supportive communities.
Places where you can be yourself, share your struggles, learn from each other.
And most importantly, remember, you're not alone in this.
Millions of men out there are wrestling with these same questions.
Trying to figure out how to be a good man in a world that sends such mixed messages.
Reject those negative narratives that society throws at men and step into your power.
Be the best version of yourself on your own terms.
Powerful message, and one that a lot of men need to hear.
Absolutely.
So to all the men listening out there, your masculinity is not a burden, it's a gift.
Embrace it. Celebrate it.
Use it to make a positive impact on the world.
And to all the women listening, remember, true equality doesn't mean erasing the differences between men and women.
It's about recognizing and valuing those differences, creating a society where both genders can thrive and contribute.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the patriarch's rebirth. We covered a lot today, from those biological roots of patriarchy to the challenges of modern masculinity.
Lots to think about.
Hopefully, this conversation has given you some new insights and challenged your thinking about these complex issues.
Remember, we're just scratching the surface here. There's always more to explore and learn.
And if you're interested in diving deeper into Riker's analysis, you can find The Patriarch's Rebirth, available for purchase on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
Check it out.
And as always, we'd love to hear from you. What resonated with you? What questions do you still have? Share your thoughts and keep the conversation going. This is how we learn and grow together.